Hello, everybody, people present in the room, and of course, the large majority of the people online. I'm Jean-Philippe Desmartins, Head of Responsible Investment at Edmond Rothschild, also very engaged in the Observatoire de l'Immatériel Wiki France and chair of Wiki Europe. At Wiki Europe, we have the pleasure to have a new member, Wiki Belgium, since November 24 last week. And we are in the process to transform Wiki in Europe into an association international sans but lucratif, probably in the next days, early December. For this international session, we will use the language of Shakespeare, so thank you to keep that on mind. We will go through all the acceleration, hyper-acceleration of standardization, what we notice regarding non-financial reporting, sustainability reporting, ESG reporting. That will be the question number one. I will ask to the three speakers, and the second question will be what place, what role for intangibles in this acceleration. For that, I have three great people in this roundtable. I'm going to start with Patrick de Cambourg, who is physically present in the room, chair of ANC, French accounting authorities. A lot of responsibilities at the European and international level, including, of course, EFRAG. I will let him, of course, develop the point, and I can testify that he has been very interested and involved in the intangibles for the last 20 years. We will have an online Jonathan Labray. Jonathan Labray is Chief Policy Officer at the Value Reporting Fondation, and he will present, of course, this new and key and important initiative organization. And before that, he had the key responsibilities at IRRC from 2012 to 2021. And last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Mario Abella, who is a professor of accounting at the IESEG School of Management in France, but also a lot of experience in different organizations, such as WBCSD, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, expert at Wiki, and also recently was co-chair of an important report published by EFRAG. Mario has extensive regulatory and setting experience. I start immediately with Patrick. Thank you for telling us towards which standardization in terms of sustainability ESG we are going.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. I think it is important you mentioned hyper-acceleration, and it's true that sustainability reporting is becoming mainstream. You know, this is probably the key event in terms of corporate reporting, this is probably the key game-changing event that has been contemplated in the last couple of years and probably more recently. But, you know, financial reporting is extremely mature. The idea is that corporate reporting should be walking on two legs. The financial reporting one that is pretty mature, but an emerging one that needs to gain status, you know, flesh around the bone, and become the second leg. Under, of course, the brain for if you want to walk, you need two legs, but you also need to coordinate via brain, and the brain is the governance, and which is integrating all factors in order to create wealth for investors, but also wealth for all stakeholders. So the EU, as you know, as one of its key pillars, political pillars, as sustainable development and sustainable finance as one of those pillars, and has to, you know, realized a couple of years ago, I would say January, just after the with the new commission. Remember, it was December 19. So in January 20, it became obvious that it was absolutely necessary to succeed in providing relevant and reliable sustainability data. Without that, obviously, there is a big risk of, having greenwashing, ESG washing, and at the end of the day, not to deliver on the public policies and the private strategies that are key to sustainable development and sustainable finance. So, it's like having a plane without having any instrument to measure the altitude, the speed, and other key factors without which you are really navigating in the fog. So they realized that they had to put a priority on tackling the challenge of relevant and reliable data, sustainability data, and that's what they are doing. So two aspects to that. The first one is that the Commission prepared the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which has been approved by the Commissioners in April 21, and which is now following the legislative process of the EU, i.e. discussions in Parliament, discussions at Council level, and then beginning of next year, what is called the trilogue, i.e. discussion between Parliament, Council, and the Commission. This text is expected to become law in the first half of 2022, towards the end maybe of the, let's say, with a target date of June at the latest. This is a text that is game-changing because it establishes a mandatory regime for sustainability reporting, which will be applied by all large entities in the EU. Large in the EU is not so large because when you take the criteria, among the criteria, the number of employees, you're talking about businesses with 250 employees or more. So at the end of the day, it's a rather low threshold. Therefore, 50,000 entities in the EU would have to apply this mandatory regime. This mandatory regime would cover environment, but also social matters and governance matters. So it's a comprehensive coverage that is contemplated. It would also be established under the principle of double materiality, i.e., the risks and opportunities for the businesses, but also the impacts of businesses on people and planet. This information would be located in the management report. At EFRAG, we promote the idea of having sustainability statements as a counterpart to financial statements in order to create a strong basis for consistency between the two legs of information. This information would be audited by third parties and would be also able to be digitized from day one. So that's a pretty ambitious project. In terms of timeline, I know it is being discussed in the Parliament as we speak, and at Council level also. So there might be a change because, with big change, sometimes people say 1 year more would be a good idea. But at the moment, in the draft directive, we're talking about 2024 first reports with a reference to a reporting year 2023. So quite frankly, it is tomorrow. And there would be also several sets of standards. The first set of standards to be delivered in 2022, which would be an element of consolidation or of the best practices, and then a second set and further sets. That's the first point. The second point, which I will address quickly, is that There is a directive, but there is also the directive is delegating the responsibility of drafting and adopting standards to the Commission. And the Commission has entrusted EFRAG with the elaboration, but then it would follow the delegated act process, and delegated acts have a key characteristic, which is that they create obligations throughout the EU without transposition, which is certainly a unifying factor. And EFRAG at the moment, on the basis of a task force of 35 people, plus 30 full-time equivalent in Secretariat, is elaborating the standards. We have already made publicly available a working paper on climate. We intend to publish before Christmas a second version of that climate prototype, together with what we call the cross-cutting standards, other environmental standard prototypes as well, and there will be also the social and governance one, either just before Christmas or as a Christmas present, if I may say so, or right after Christmas, say early January. We would then have the input of experts, and then we will move to a consultation process because we need to deliver the first set by mid-2022.
Thank you, Patrick. So one idea to keep in mind for European, including of course French companies, is that the journey has already started, but it accelerates tomorrow. Jonathan, thank you to present your Value Reporting Foundation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe. And as Patrick has very much developed the thought that we're really meeting at a critical time in the evolution of the global corporate reporting system. And at last, and I say this as somebody who's worked in corporate reporting, I've worked in the accounting world for many years, but the corporate reporting world for the last 9 years full-time, I think that vision of having a globally accepted and comprehensive corporate reporting system, that vision is now very much in sight. And I'm going to contribute to this conversation about intangibles very much from my perspective of having worked for the International Integrated Reporting Council for so many years, and now, of course, the Value Reporting Foundation. And it's very exciting that the resources that we've developed, the integrated reporting framework in particular, which as all of your contributors will know, embeds intangibles as one of the fundamental concepts of the integrated reporting framework through the 6 capitals. That work will now be acquired by the IFRS Foundation as it develops its work to establish the International Sustainability Standards Board and the work to bring about the global baseline of sustainability disclosure standards relevant to capital markets on a global basis. That, of course, will be so connected with the work that Patrick has been doing at EFRAG and the European Union developments as well. And the Value Reporting Foundation is going to play its full role in bringing about that vision of a comprehensive system by offering its technical resources, so the framework and standards that we have developed, the SASB standards and the integrated reporting framework, and all our staff resources and networks and market outreach to that effort under the governance of the IFRS Foundation. And the exciting part, of course, is that the monitoring board of the IFRS Foundation is very much governed by the IOSCO, the securities regulators. And so the standards and the work that we will be developing will very much have the signature of the securities regulators on it for the first time. So that whole concept of having the regulatory endorsement for the work that we've been developing is something that we see as very important indeed. Now, intangibles have always been a critical factor in explaining and understanding value creation to its full extent. And we, as the old IRC and now the Value Reporting Foundation, have worked closely with Wiki over the years. Wiki have been part of the Integrated Reporting Council and remain part of our council. And the reason goes back to really the rationale for why the IRC was set up in the first place, which is today that over 80% of the value of a company, its market cap, is accounted for today by the intangibles, by the brand, the reputation, the intellectual capital, the copyrights, the trademarks, and so on. And intangibles are characterized in different ways, of course, but for integrated reporting, it's really by reference to the 6 capitals: the intellectual capital, the human capital, relationship capital, social capital, and so on. These are the key capitals that we really think of as being the intangible sources of value creation. And critically, with integrated reporting and integrated thinking, and the discipline that framework brings uniquely in the world, is really understanding the trade-offs between the capitals. So not presenting intangibles as a silo, but really understanding the interrelationship between intellectual capital, for example, and financial capital, and how that is impacted through the governance of the organization. Patrick very rightly talked about the governance of the organization, because we've always said that corporate reporting should not be about producing a report in its own right, but actually be about changing the behavior of organizations and impacting the governance of organizations. And from an investor perspective, intangibles are becoming essential today for understanding the competitive advantage of businesses, particularly in growth sectors. Because, of course, we're now living through a knowledge-based economy. And so understanding the value of intangibles is critical for valuing those high-growth companies that may have underdeveloped balance sheets, but have a very highly developed sense of the skills they need and the ability to attract the best talent and intellectual property. And it's critical for all of our pension funds. It's actually a point about social inclusion, that we get better at being able to manage and understand and report on the intangible value, so that the value can be reaped and generated for all of our pension funds, and aren't limited to a very small number of investors who have the privilege of understanding the value of these very high growth companies. I just want to conclude, Jean-Paul, in this very early stage of our conversation, just to explain the transition that we've seen in the conversation on intangibles over the 9 years that I've been involved with integrated reporting. And I think this is best exemplified by the Japanese example, because intellectual capital became a key reason why the Japanese market really adopted integrated reporting wholesale through the market, because they recognized that their companies were undervalued, because the market and particular investors were not valuing the intangible value within their companies. And so what the Japanese companies started to do was link the intangible value, the copyrights and the trademarks, to their financial performance over the long term. And they use that principle of future orientation to really position their businesses for the long term. But today what we're seeing is that a focus on intangibles can be an accelerator towards an acceptance of sustainable development as a critical feature of contemporary business management, connecting the society's needs to the business needs and plugging innovation into the business model so that we can design more sustainable products and services, therefore providing investment opportunities for the trillions of capital that we now know is seeking a more sustainable home. One piece of evidence to conclude, which is the recent report by the International Energy Agency, the highly respected IEA, that has said that 35% of cumulative CO2 emission reductions needed for sustainable development come from technologies that are currently at prototype or demonstration phase. In other words, we need a real revolution in the investment and understanding of research and development, and a recognition of its importance as a matter of urgency. And they say without that strong and targeted R&D efforts in critical technologies, net zero emissions are simply not achievable. So I think we are potentially at a position now where we could be entering a golden age for the intangibles, an age in which they are recognized not just as drivers of long-term value creation and connecting intangible value with financial value, but also for their potential in reshaping business models and helping to deliver on the global ambitions through a more sustainable world. And I think that's where potentially what I've said and what Patrick said connect and intersect in this first section. So with that, I'll hand over and back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I completely agree with what you said regarding the move in Japan. It's very true. Mario, you are a practitioner. You're also an academic. What can you say? I'll let you the floor. You are on mute.
Apologies about that. Thanks a lot, Jean-Philippe, and welcome everyone to this great conference. I want to just provide a little bit of a critique, maybe just signpost a few issues to think about in the context of our discussion today. So the first point to make is that when it comes to corporate reporting, it's pretty clear that corporate reporting in Europe is the best in the world. So that's great, but it's still not great enough. So when we look at the work done by the Alliance of Corporate Transparency, for example, 33% of companies, and they looked at 1,000 companies, failed to disclose their business models, which if I translate that into a kind of financial context, that's like failing to include your balance sheet. So there's still a lot to do. I think one of the things that I've seen advancing over the years has been this increased focus on transparency. It's become rather old-fashioned to talk about accountability. And so the mantra has been, let's just disclose more and more information. Because we know, if you disclose more information, you reduce information asymmetry and the cost of capital goes down. So the finance theory tells us. But I think if you step back and listen to what Patrick was saying about wanting to change behavior and seeing these environmental and social outcomes addressed, which are so much part of what it means to be European, then I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the notion of accountability, because for accountability you need a relationship. And I think one of the gaps in our current reporting is there's a lot of reporting of information about the company. But we know when it comes to value creation and the maintenance of value and value destruction, what's important to the business model is the quality of those relationships. Now, preparers know this, and I think we need to be careful that we don't create the disconnect that exists in financial reporting between management accounting and what's included in statutory accounts. And we've seen the prevalence of alternative performance measures or non-GAAP measures, and we know increasingly investors and also management look to those alternatives. So I think we need to just be careful that, and I'm not trying to be an apologist for preparers for companies, but I think it's important to, rather than have 100 indicators, maybe just have 3 when it comes to the relationship with the customer. Because when I talk to investors, the Net Promoter Score is something that they're particularly interested in. Telling me the number of customers that I have may be interesting, but absent a context, that information really doesn't tell me anything. So, Jean-Philippe, I know Wiki's done a lot of work on KPIs for different industries, and part of that has been picked up by SASB as well. I think this is really a really important point, because at the moment, some of that information is there, but it's hard to find because there's so much other information. And I think the tremendous challenge that the standard setter and Patrick's team have is achieving that right balance of tell me everything against tell me what is really important, or at least what management thinks is really important. And then as an investor, capital provider, employee, I can make a judgment about whether or not I think they're making the right assessments. And at the moment, we can't compare. So I had a look this morning at net promoter scores for two large French supermarkets. Auchan, their net promoter score is 42. Carrefour, their net promoter score increased by 12 points, but they don't tell me what the base figure is. So it's 12, it's gone up, good, that's wonderful. But I wanted to compare it against Auchan because I thought 42%, that seems quite low. Why? What is that just the norm in that industry? And well, again, you know, there's very little basis for comparison and therefore very little to kind of hold on to hold management to account and the board to account, which is what accounting is all about. So I guess that's my perspective sort of as an outsider, so to speak, in terms of looking at intangibles. And I think in the context of intangibles, it's very much about information about the quality of relationships. Because if you look at what's in IFRS 3 and what we recognise on a business acquisition, business combination, it's all those things. You know, it's the customer lists, it's the knowledge in the business, it's all of those things that kind of count. So I think we just need to think about what's important and what's, you know, maybe important to some, but is a bit of a distraction, a bit of noise, unfortunately. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Mario. Jonathan and Mario already introduced also the point on intangible. So I let you develop the question, which is very important today because we celebrate the 10th edition of our National Day dealing with intangible assets in France. This point also the question, what role, what place for intangibles? And of course, do not hesitate to react to the two other introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. As regards intangibles, I would like to mention that the CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainability Directive, is mentioning intangibles. And I think it is the first time that a legal level, so level 1 text, is mentioning intangibles. That's creating some reactions. Some member states are asking themselves why. They are maybe concerned that too many, that would lead to an information overload. But so we have to be careful and to make sure that it stays where it is. Now, I wouldn't be too concerned if there was a drawback, because I think that, as Jonathan mentioned, in fact, intangible is a transversal concept that is, in fact, affecting all capitals. So, you know, you can take the approach to disclosures on a capital in a restrictive manner, but if you take it from an extensive and comprehensive manner, you have somehow to disclose the level of intangible value that has been created. And by the way, some of the disclosures, it's like Monsieur Jourdain et la prose in French, you are in fact speaking intangibles even when you don't know sometimes. But it's better to be conscious. There is nevertheless a risk that we need to be careful about. Financial reporting, if you listen to many observers, they will tell you that externalities are not properly reflected and that there are potential liabilities that should be taken into account. That's a bias that people have, which is extremely common. So if you follow those guys, you would say, I need to reduce my equity because, if I have additional liabilities, I also have less equity, to oversimplify. But at the same time, market caps reflecting minority transactions, not to mention majority transactions with a premium of about, 15, 20%, are much, much higher by a factor of 4, 5, 6, and I don't mention Tesla, by a multiplier that is significant of accounting equity. So where is it? It's coming from intangibles. So, if we were forgetting on the way to disclose, even if it's difficult to start with, because metrics are not, are so much entity specific that comparability is difficult. But if you were leaving aside on the way intangibles, we would be bound to have a third revolution 5 years down the road to introduce that. But nevertheless, I see Jonathan smiling because I think we are speaking a common language. Because today the focus is more on externalities than on what I call positive internalities, which are not reflected by financial reporting. And I think that is a key point which we need to take into account and take care of.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, Mario, I'll let you react before we see in the room if there are some questions. Jonathan, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more actually with what Patrick's just said. And what we're going to be doing actually at the Value Reporting Foundation is really thinking quite deeply about how we reflect and recognize how we should be recognizing the intangible value, because what a lot of investors are telling us is that they don't want the balance sheet to be loaded with the numbers, with the intangibles, but they want the recognition, but they almost want to do the work themselves to work out what the implications are for the value of the companies. So they want a deeper explanation, kind of company by company, about the intangible value as the management sees it. But what some investors are telling us is that they want to then go off and do the work and work out what potentially the competitive advantage is as they see it, with putting it through their models. So it really is a question of understanding, not now, I don't think whether there's the importance of it, because I think there is a recognition of that, but how we recognize it and how we actually report on it in a way that's useful and valuable. So that's some of the thinking that we're doing, and we'll be doing quite a lot of consultation around that in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mario, an additional remark?
I would build on the point Patrick was making about intangibles being a transversal concept, because I think there's already a lot of information you can piece together to make an assessment of the value of a company. And we know that because the markets are doing it every day. They're pricing capital. So the market is making some assessment of the intangibles in the company. And I think we need to be careful when we talk about the 80% based on the Ocean Tomo survey, or 85%. There's various numbers. It's interesting, and I won't get into French philosophy, but it's interesting how that's now become a fact in the discourse. When it suggests that there's this 80% that management are completely ignoring. And I think that that's a misrepresentation of what's happening in business. Because I think if you look at what's happening in business, they're very much focused on the 80%. They're looking at their relationship with their customers. They're looking at the relationship with employees, managing their costs. All of those things are being managed. Innovation, all this stuff exists. So I think we need to be careful that we're not portraying this as something that's completely new. Some of the information may be newish, but I think it's important that we give companies recognition for the ones doing it well, for the fact that, this 80% isn't, a kind of X in an equation that's a complete unknown. And then finally, I would add really the importance of the business model, which is a bit of a forgotten concept, but it's in the directive and it's critical because it's tell me how your company creates or destroys value and tell me the inherent risks and opportunities in your business model. And those risks and opportunities also pick up on Patrick's point about internalities and externalities. And I agree. I think they are critical, and that's why we're seeing now an effect on the balance sheet because oil and gas companies are having to write off certain assets because they won't be able to, because of changes in legislation and changes in society, climate change, they won't be able to realise the full asset they originally had on the balance sheet. So all these things are totally interconnected. So I think you can get at them in different ways.
Thank you, Mario. We have 5 minutes for questions. So I'm going to ask in the room if there is a question. Il y a une question dans la salle?
Thank you. Thank you for all this discussion and very interesting elements. I had one question. I understand that, Patrick, with the EFRAG task force, you are quite busy setting the rules, defining the next taxonomy at European level for the non-financial KPIs and so on. But I had a question about the next phase, the implementation. How far do you anticipate what needs to be done afterwards, once you have the text, the final text implemented, voted by the Parliament? And afterwards, as it has been said, it is more a question of changing the behaviors of the investors, of the public bodies, of the companies, and so on. So it requires, I assume, teaching, pedagogy, training, onboarding. It's a real transformation. So my question, in a nutshell, is how far do you anticipate the implementation phase in a way, and all that goes with it to make this change happen?
Ça a l'air de marcher, oui. Thank you. No, when you are confronted with a game-changing step forward, it's always the question. And I think that the Parliament and also member states are considering the advantages, the pros and cons of moving fast and deep, or fast and less deep. There is always an arbitration. It is true that the 2024 deadline with reference to 2023 is pretty tough. So I suspect that the discussions might give a little more time to prepare us to elaborate their sustainability reports. Now, it's not sure, and it is being discussed as we speak. Even if there was a postponement by, say, 1 year, I think it's already a significant project management for the 50,000 entities I was talking about. So, my recommendation would be, well, first of all, at standard setting, remember, we have several sets. I would like to say that in order to have proper sustainability information, you need to have, the qualities are relevance, it has to be relevant, it has to reach a level of faithful representation, it has to be comparable, reliable, understandable. Faithful representation can be seen in isolation with each topic, or can be seen also as a global set of disclosures on sustainability matters. If we take that last meaning of faithful representation, I think we will reach a reasonable platform for faithful representation by the end of the decade, not before. So it means that we will have, it's like a staircase, we'll have a first game-changing step because you start moving up, but there will be probably 3 or 4 behind in order to get to a level that will be satisfactory and will place sustainability reporting on an equal footing with financial reporting. Now, for the first set, if we prioritize, it's already a change, and we are, of course, trying to navigate between what is feasible in 1 or 2 years and what would be feasible with more time left to preparers.
Thank you. We still have 2 minutes. So just one simple question to the other speakers, Jonathan and Mario. When you think about intangibles reporting, your first priority, your first reaction is qualitative reporting in the management report, for instance, or quantitative reporting with KPIs, or both, or do you have other solutions in mind? Jonathan?
Well, I've seen it. I've seen reporting on intangibles done in 2 ways that I've thought has been effective. One, in some of the technology companies in Japan, where they really do give some thought to the value of their patents and copyrights and the future, and how that will impact on the business and the financial performance of the business going forward. And they're really trying to communicate the inherent potential future value of their stock of intellectual capital today, and they're looking to do that for a very real purpose, which is to explain to the market how their business is potentially undervalued today because of this stock of intangible value. But then I've seen intangibles explained in ways that really, for me, is more powerful today, which is linking it to the business model, as Mario was saying, linking it really to the business model of the organization and how you're using intangible value to change the whole ethos, culture, purpose, the products and services of your business, and then attracting new capital, really kind of reimagine your business in a way, particularly looking at it through the lens of sustainability and sustainable development. So for me, that is the urgent task, because I think that it's really this decade's mission is to get this work completed. But I've seen, but in terms of effective reporting on intangibles, they're really the 2 ways that I've seen this come through.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mario, last word on intangibles reporting?
Sure. I think they serve 2 different purposes. So recognition on the balance sheet, so including intangibles in the financial statements, is different from having information about the quality of relationships and all those things that either, all the material relationships that have an impact on your business model and value creation. I think you need both because the management report and information about the quality of those relationships is going to give you a much more dynamic sense of the intangibles that have not yet been translated into a kind of financial sense as we have under IFRS 3. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. You know, I'm the timekeeper, so I'm the bad guy today, so I have to stop right now. But I would like to thank you very much, Jonathan, Mario, and Patrick, of course. Thank you very much. We can upload the 3 speakers. Thank you.